I've never felt so much pain before. It was a Sunday afternoon and pretty hot here in North Alabama. My dog was playing in the yard and my son inside playing video games. I didn't mind that I lived in a little brick house in the middle of nowhere. It was just the thought of being alive that counts. I remember exactly what I was looking at when I felt it. I was looking at the mailbox and wondering, why is it such an ugly color? When my leg went numb, I guess I was in shock at first because I didn't feel it. But after a few seconds later, the most blinding pain I've ever experienced in my life hit me. It was so bad that I screamed with everything I had and leaped for the door. I was in the Marines and deployed in Iraq in 2004, so I'm not a pussy when it comes to pain. My son was already in the living room when I stumbled inside. I looked at him and nodded my head, signaling for him to grab the first aid. My head was spinning at this point, and none of the first aid supplies seemed to slow it down from feeling worse. So we called 911. I think I passed out because there's a gap in my memory, but I do remember being in the hospital for a few days. They kept trying to figure out what had bit me. The bite of my leg was no bigger than a mosquito bite, but hurt like a bullet wound. The doctor concluded that I was bitten by a spider, and had some sort of reaction to it. That's when it happened. The side effects. My son had gone back to his mother's house, and I leaned against the kitchen counter with a beer, wondering what that was. I stood back up straight to walk into the living room when I jumped back into shock. My daughter was sitting at the kitchen table. She was sipping tea and reading her favorite book. I mumbled her name and she got up with a smile and walked into the living room. I chased after her yelling her name, but when I turned the corner, there was nothing. My daughter died before I had my son. She'd be 16 years old now, but she died when she was 11. I was almost in shock at that moment, wondering what I was going to do. I searched the house desperately, but found nothing. Just the dark, lonely face of a sad house. I decided that I must have been deprived of sleep, so I decided to go to bed. I think I woke up around 3 or 4 a.m. with a dry mouth. Usually when this happens, I get up and get some water, but this time, for some reason, I was too scared to. It was almost like my instincts told me not to. My mind gave me every scary thought possible until I finally decided to sit on the side of my bed to think clearly. I sat up and did this when I heard a raspy old voice behind me say, "Hey son, where do you think you're going?" He had a deep country accent, and I thought the sounding voice that sounded too familiar. "Dad?" I spun around to see my clock ticking and my American flag hung up on the wall. "What the fuck?" was all I could manage. You see, my dad was a tough countryman that could survive just about everything except his smoking habits. He owned a large part of land, and when he died I got a piece, which I used to build the house I'm in now, and was in. I didn't like my dad that much. He cared more about himself and being an asshole than being a dad. I got up and walked to the bathroom for my water, because his voice might have come from me being half awake, but it was so real. I walked into the bathroom, flipped on the light, drank some water from the sink, and looked into the mirror. I saw my face in the mirror, but something didn't feel right. And then I noticed my dad's smiling face peering around the shower curtains, which were right behind me. I yelled and swung at the curtains for my fist to only go straight into them, without hitting anything on the other side. My dad's face was gone. I woke up the next morning wondering who I should tell, if anyone at all, but I didn't want to sound crazy, even though I think I am. My life has now turned into a living nightmare. It's now consumed by voices and sights of dead people with the occasional phone call. These phone calls usually have sad piano music playing in the background, reminding me of a funeral. There's always a grin-sounding old lady reading off the endless list of names until I hang up. It confused me at first until I started recognizing some of them. They were all the names of dead people. I'm now huddled in my room, locked away in my house. I see dead people walking around outside now, and every time I pick up my phone to call someone, it's just the same old lady reading off names with the music. I don't know what to do. I'm stuck. Me and my best friend Jack went out one evening to our local park with our girlfriends. When we got there, it was still light outside, as it was every evening. As 20-year-old adults do, we decided to play a good old-fashioned game of hide and seek. We let the girls go first because, you know, ladies first and all that. They went off to hide, and we waited a few minutes at the bottom of the hill so they could hide. The park we were at was surrounded by a small forest-like area, which is thick with trees and bushes and has a load of areas to hide in. As we looked, it started to get darker and darker, making it very hard to find them. We looked in this thick area with low-hanging trees and thicket. The branches were so low, we actually had to climb over them in order to go deeper. We turned our flashlights in on our cell phones to assist us in looking. Eventually the sun had gone down, it was completely dark, and it took us ages to find the girls. 40 minutes in total. Then I saw Jack's light disappear. I found the girls after a few seconds, and we called to Jack to tell him the news they'd been found. We call and call for about a couple of minutes as we come out of the trees and onto the path where we started. A few seconds later, Jack comes running down from the top of the hill, panting and confused. We asked what had happened, and he said that 1 minute he was looking for the girls. The next he was passed out on top of the hill, with 2 sets of glowing red eyes staring right at him. He found his phone a couple of meters away and ran down the hill. Note that this guy does not run for anything, unless he has to. We examined him and he said he was sore. He had scratches on his back and arms and a huge red patch on his chest. He also happened to be wearing a ring with a satanic symbol on it. I'm not quite sure if the whole event was to do with a strange ring he had bought hidden away in a gift store years beforehand, or just a strange occurrence. Opinions? I was 5 years old when the shadow people started visiting me. At first, they just stand in the corner of my room while I slept and watch over me. The gray people make your body freeze while they're there. You can only move your eyes to stare at them. Other than that, you're frozen in pure terror. I told my parents about the shadow people when they first showed up, but of course they wrote it off as a jacket hanging on the doorknob or a shadow caused by the drapes. They told me to pray and it would go away. I tried this for years, but the thing is you can't move your mouth when the shadow people are there. I whispered a prayer through my lips and shut my eyes, but I would still know it was across the room staring at me. I started having night terrors in 4th grade. My parents had split up and lived on a farm out in the hills. My 4 brothers and I slept in our mom's cousin's basement. I would wake up in the middle of the night and be frozen. I didn't see the shadow people here because I had a top bunk, but I could feel their ominous presence. The next year my mom moved back in with my dad and I got my old room back. I would lay awake at night in that queen-size bed and stare at the walls, feeling the gaze upon my back. This went on for a couple years. As long as I ignored them, it was okay. Then we moved into the slave house. The slave house, as one of the youngest brothers dubbed it, I'm the oldest of 7 kids now, was an old red brick house that a rich right banker had built in the middle of an all-black neighborhood just before the mid-century riots. Apparently he had what the realtor called servants. My brother called it slave house, however, because the people they saw running around their bedrooms at night, the shadows would run up the slave stairs and into their rooms and back all night. You see, this house had a strange layout. The upstairs was where the master had stayed and had his bedroom, and a separate bedroom, and then down the hallway there was a door with a lock on the wrong side. He'd had the ability to lock his slaves into their side of the house. They could access the kitchen and the washroom downstairs, but all the doors on the slave side of the house that led outside required a key to unlock the deadbolt from inside. The brother, just younger than me, and I had our beds where the master's children had slept downstairs. We too were able to lock the door to the slave side of the house. It was in this room that I had my first close encounter with a shadow person. I woke up in the middle of the night for no apparent reason and turned away from the wall to look around the room. I froze. Standing at the side of my bed was a gray shadow person with the most frightening face. I'd never seen the face of one up close before. They normally stood in the shadows where their faces were obscure. They talk about fear of the unknown being the most scary, but no, this face was pure horror. Its twisted features were evil, feasted on my fears as I lay there, paralyzed. I closed my eyes and waited until I felt the heat of the sun on my eyelids before opening them. I moved away from college and the shadow people disappeared for a while, but not because they were gone. I didn't sleep most of my first semester. I'd stay up with my girlfriend or watch TV. I'd found that if I fell asleep when I wasn't trying, I didn't see the shadow people. I started drinking Monster at night so I'd be able to stay up multiple days in a row. Finals came up and I figured I should get some sleep. I called my girlfriend up and had her on speaker on my phone all night. I woke up around 3:30 that morning to a rattling noise. I was frozen, but I got words out to my girlfriend, waking her on the other end of the line. They're back. They aren't real, baby. You'll be okay. They are real. I could hear the rattling on the door. They were down there. The rattling got louder as I got more scared, frozen on my bed. Can you not hear that? Hear what? I could barely hear her voice over the rattling. My girlfriend talked me down and the rattling subsided. I took deep breaths to calm my nerves. We moved in together and I didn't see the gray shadow people for years. Even when she went away for work, I never saw them. I could feel their presence, but I never had to bear their awful faces. And then one day, I was taking a bath and I fell asleep. I felt like I left my body. I could see my body below me in the tub. Face submerged. Beside me, one of the gray people stood with scissors. I looked down and a string connected me to my body. He was trying to cut it. I jumped back into my body and flung my head out of the water, gasping for breath. I haven't seen the gray people since. Though they are the most terrifying things in the world. Part of me wants to relive that terror. Guess I'm twisted.